Happy Monday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. We have some talking points and finally some changes with your forecast as we head into the end of the work week. But once we head into the weekend, forecast still a little bit up in the air. Right now, it is looking like it is going to be a mostly dry weekend, but it's all dependent on which solution is right in terms of the models. They're definitely not agreeing terribly much. So first things first, a happy first day of fall to you. Today marks the first day of the astronomical fall, not to get that confused with the meteorological fall, which did start officially on September 1st, but this is according to the tilt of the Earth and the tilt of that axis away from the sun. So obviously, as us in the northern hemisphere, we start to see that axis tilted a little bit farther away from the sun. That's going to mark the kind of time of year where we start to get some cooler temperatures, because obviously when we're tilted towards the sun, we're getting more hours of direct sunlight and your temperatures are a little bit warmer. But today will officially mark the transition into that cooler portion of the year. Although it is the first day of fall, it is definitely not feeling like it. The first couple of days are still going to be above average in terms of your afternoon high temperatures. But finally, we do have a shot at some widespread rain, and that's going to be towards Thursday into Friday this week. And like I said, we're trying to clear out for any outdoor plans you have Saturday and Sunday. It is a big weekend football-wise. Georgia and Alabama, also the Ryder Cup going on, and many other really good football games going on all across the NFL and college. I imagine many of you are coordinating some outdoor plans and just some fun activities with friends and family in order to enjoy all of those good matches. So the weekend forecast is going to be of vital importance. I wish I could give you a better idea as of right now, but we'll talk about the disagreement that we're seeing amongst our long-range models in just a little bit. So here's a look around the quad here in central Georgia. We have plenty of higher level clouds, but overall it's still a story of mostly sunny skies. Just seeing a little bit of white mixed in with the blue skies here at this hour. Take a look down at the Georgia National Fairgrounds. We saw this over the course of this weekend. They set up the big fun slide, our first indication that the fair is not too far away. Honestly, I was scratching my head a little bit. I don't know why the fun slide always gets put up maybe about a week and a half in advance, but I guess they just like to go ahead and get a head start on things. We'll continue to see lots of vendors and lots of rides get set up over the course of the next 10 days until we get to the Georgia National Fair. And that will be important because the fall season, obviously not starting off on a very fall-like feeling note, but once we get into the end of the fair, that's kind of my benchmark unofficially for when the temperatures finally do cool down. And maybe we can get some high temperatures that look like your current temperatures here before 11 a.m. A good mix of mid and upper 70s, 77 a very popular number amongst Gordon, Milledgeville, Forsyth, Eatonton, Sparta, Monticello, and taking it down to Roberta, Butler, another 77 down in Rochelle. The farther south and southeast that you go, you can kind of see a mix of some mid 70s, Eastman still hanging out in the low 70s, 79 there in Vidalia for our warmest temperature. So how does that match up against the eastern United States here early this Monday morning? 85 still takes the cake. New Orleans always has been going above and beyond and maybe just having that warmest temperature in the early morning hours, still holding on to that humidity and some of that warmer air along the Gulf Coast. Plenty of our neighbors are already into the 80s. In fact, Montgomery at 80 degrees already over in kind of central east Alabama, but there is a bit of a wedge setup that we do have. It's not very potent. You can see some slightly cooler air farther to the north and northeast, maybe up in the North Georgia mountains, back up into upstate South Carolina. But overall, it is a fairly uniform forecast, and we're not getting a good picture of maybe some cooler temperatures behind a frontal boundary, which we could be looking at as we go into the end of the work week. Dew point temperatures is still noticeably humid, somewhere in the upper 60s, maybe some patchy areas of that dark green color. So we have ample moisture in the atmosphere that could sprout a couple of afternoon rain showers, but really just looking at the spotty and isolated nature of those showers like we have over the last week, maybe even 2 weeks. It feels like I've been saying that in the forecast each and every day. So you can notice that big patch of drier air. That is once again a sensor issue that is happening up there around the LaGrange area. That's not just a patch of no humidity whatsoever. But the southeast continues to be a dividing line of light green and patchy areas of that dark green, indicating your super muggy spots. And take a look at those colors you see over there by LaGrange. Even seeing shades of white, that's going to emphasize feels like numbers in the negative. So obviously we know that is definitely not the case. Your feels like numbers across central Georgia, a mix of 70s and 80s. We'll talk about how that slight humidity is going to increase our feels like numbers over the coming days. Winds and wind gusts coming out of the east and the northeast, so that's what's indicative of that wedge setup, but obviously, like I mentioned, not very potent. We do have a steady breeze anywhere from about 5 to 7, maybe even 9 miles per hour here just before the 11 a.m. hour. So hour by hour, we'll continue to warm up eventually by the time we get to lunchtime into the low 80s. And then it looks like we're stalling somewhere in the upper 80s as we go into 3, 4, and 5 o'clock later this afternoon. I have a high temperature today that is once again above average of 86 degrees this time of year. 89 is my forecasted high for this first day of fall. Definitely holding on to a little bit of that summertime heat as we transition into the new season. Mostly sunny skies for the majority of central Georgia, but a select few areas will luck out and catch a very short-lived rain shower. We'll have an easterly breeze today, mainly 5 to 10 miles per hour. Wouldn't put it out of the picture to maybe see a gust up to 15 miles per hour. Sunrise this morning, 7:23, so we continue to see that sunrise get later and later into the 7 a.m. hour. So let's talk about the numbers. 89 for a forecasted high today. We hit 88 yesterday. Notice your average high yesterday was up to 87 degrees. So we continue to see maybe about every 5 to 7 days about a degree downtick in your average high temperature. Your morning lows have actually continued to be a few degrees below average recently. 61 for a morning low yesterday on Sunday morning. 100 was the record high yesterday back in 1925, and in 1918 it was mighty chilly, somewhere in the upper 40s for that record low temperature. So we didn't record rain yesterday. Surprise, surprise. We haven't recorded rain many days. In fact, with the exception of about 3 or 4 days in the month of September, and it's only been pretty minuscule amounts of rain at that. Your departure of rain. Just about 2 weeks ago, it was somewhere around 6.5 inches above average. We're now just over 4.5 inches above where we should be at this point in the year. Still a very good cushion. We really don't have to worry about this number very much whatsoever, even despite the fact it has been a very dry stretch as of recently. Sunrise yesterday was at 7:22, so remember 7:23 was the sunrise this morning, so obviously that sunrise continuing to get later and later. Sunset yesterday was at 7:32, almost in line with a 7:30 sunset as we transition into the first day of fall. So speaking of those hours of daylights, the days will continue to get shorter. We have our first time stamp right here, which is today, September 22nd. Sunrise, I guess, was a little bit off. This morning it was 1 minute later than what I have up there. And your sunset, 7:30 is what we're forecasting for tonight, right there around 7:30, 7:31. Overall, you have just over 12 hours of daylight as we go throughout today. So more than half the day, you will see some sunshine. But then as we transition into the middle of October, sunrise around 7:38, sunset getting really close to the 7 p.m. hour, and just under 11 and a half hours of daylight. So as we transition into the end of this week, maybe the beginning of next week, we're actually going to see more hours of nighttime as opposed to more hours of sunlight throughout the day. And then November 2nd is an important date that you'll want to go ahead and throw on your radar, maybe mark it down on the calendar if it doesn't already have it for you. That's going to be when we fall back. So daylight saving time will officially be ending, which means our sunrise going to get an hour earlier. So you will notice sunrise will be before the 7 a.m. hour once again, which will be nice. We'll get some earlier light in the sky. But sunset, yes, it is going to be very early. Not only even before 6 p.m., but how about 5:42 in just under 11 hours of daylight as we transition into November 2nd. And that's not even the shortest day in terms of hours of daylight. That will be happening as we go into the later portion of December, a couple days before Christmas when we transition into the first day of winter, that winter solstice, or maybe just a day after is typically the shortest day that we have on the calendar. So let's talk about the heat indices. We have some decent humidity in the forecast. I do believe if we hit 89 today, some of these numbers will be about a degree or two higher, but this is still a pretty similar forecast to the last couple of days. Obviously, a warm afternoon feels like numbers that are a degree, 2 or 3 warmer than what your actual temperatures are. Then as we transition into dinner time, right there around 7 p.m., 85 degrees, and going into the nighttime hours, obviously Monday Night Football, many of you may have some plans to head outdoors. Well, it will feel a lot more comfortable eventually down into the 70s as you roll into 9 p.m. So that's about the time of the start of the second quarter of that game tonight. Satellite and radar picture, patchy upper level cloud cover. As you can see, these shades of gray are not very dense in nature. So once you get some kind of lighter shades of gray, that's going to indicate some denser cloud cover in nature. This is obviously indicating higher level cloud cover that's relatively thin in nature. And it's mainly just present farther to the east, mainly east of I-75. As you look out over towards the west, it's looking like crystal clear skies. And then taking a look at the state of Georgia as a whole, there's a couple of showers already moving in from onshore across the Atlantic Ocean into coastal areas of Georgia. It looks like they might be present somewhere around Brunswick, St. Simons, getting over into Jekyll Island. Keep that in mind as we go into future view, because that sea breeze could be driving a couple of scattered shower chances as we go into the afternoon. Well, here's what the latest run has to say. 4 p.m. today, obviously down to the south and southeast of us, a couple of spotty showers here and there. Some of those could clip areas like Telfair, Wheeler, Montgomery counties. The farther south and southeast that you live, I think that's your best chance at catching some rain today. Overall, the farther north and northwest that you live, doesn't look like we have much in the way of rain throughout today, but still maintaining a very slim, about 10% chance of rain as we go into the afternoon and evening time frame. A few higher level clouds in the forecast for your Tuesday morning, maybe hinting at a couple of sprinkles popping up here and there. But that's about all we should expect for Thursday. Maybe an isolated sprinkle or two, maybe even a stray shower. Future View doesn't pick up on really anything in the way of rain on Tuesday, so that's one of those days where it's more like a 10% chance just to cover the bases. Your rain chances are looking far less impressive than that actual 10%. But overall, mostly dry weather for most here in central Georgia. It doesn't look like we have much in the way of rain. Now, Future View's been acting up a little bit. Sometimes it's only been initializing maybe about 24 hours ahead of time, and then it's really stopping. Typically, it goes 3 days out into the future. But the good news is Wednesday, not too many more talking points as opposed to your forecast for Monday and Tuesday. We still continue with mostly sunny skies, a minuscule 10% chance of rain. The only difference between Wednesday and Monday and Tuesday is it should be the warmest day of the three. 92 degrees for a high temperature, and feels like numbers that could be in the mid 90s, maybe even into the upper 90s, depending on how much humidity we have in the forecast. We've actually seen an outline from the National Weather Service that some feels like numbers could actually even flirt with the 100-degree mark. That is absolutely not what we want to hear as we head into the third official day of fall, which will be on Wednesday. But the good news and the silver lining with that is Wednesday is the warmest day I've forecasted for the next 7 days. Your afternoon highs aren't going to see a change until we get into Friday. So Thursday, you will still notice high temperature right there around 90 degrees, still above average for this time of year. But going into Friday, there's about a 7-degree decrease from 90 down to 83. And we'll talk about why that specifically is. In terms of the humidity, remember we typically see a lot of these points hover a little bit above where they actually are on the Muggy meter. So really kind of a dividing line between dew point temperatures in the 60s and in the 70s. But as we go into the weekend, it looks like we finally see some indications of some slightly drier air trying to usher into the forecast. Hopefully we can continue to keep that point on Sunday well down into the comfortable box. So those dew point temperatures in the 50s, and that's going to be where you don't really see any shades of color on the dew point temperatures map. But I do expect us to kind of hover in between the humid and the very muggy boxes, but not going to be overbearingly muggy. We're just talking about a couple of dew points that are going to be 70, 71, maybe even 72 degrees. Definitely not that full-blown summertime humidity, but a little bit more humid than what we have recently seen. Now we want to take it to the day 3 storm outlook. So obviously you see central Georgia does not find themselves in this storm outlook. Well, this is going to be a good indication of what's on the horizon past Wednesday. So obviously a level 1 extended into portions of northwest Alabama, almost the entire state of Mississippi, back up into Tennessee, Kentucky, areas farther to the west and northwest of us. Well, this is going to indicate a frontal boundary that's going to bring some widespread precipitation finally into the area. And it could, at that, maybe even bring the potential for some strong to maybe even severe weather. But at this point, we've been so dry and we have such dry conditions that we really would take the trade-off, even if it does bring some stronger weather and maybe make it a bit messy and loud outside. So here's what the long-range models have to say. You can see the European in blue right here. It's going a little bit ahead of what the GFS in the green has to say. There's not a lot of model agreement amongst the two as of right now, but this day, Thursday afternoon, is probably where you do see the most agreement amongst these two models. So Thursday into the afternoon and evening, it looks like that frontal boundary begins its push down into the state of Georgia, and along with that, us here in central Georgia. So I would bank on the second half of Thursday, probably having some rain chances and probably a pretty messy forecast to wrap up the day as we head into that second to last day of the work week. As we go into the overnight hours, it still looks like fairly widespread rain chances, but still fairly broken in nature. That's probably what's going to happen. It's not going to be as organized as you go into the overnight hours when temperatures are a little bit cooler. But then we continue with the rain chances into Friday morning, and then Friday afternoon is where things get a little bit fuzzy. The European model in blue is hinting that most of the rain is going to begin to exit the picture, but the GFS seems to think that this frontal boundary is going to stall and maybe just kind of hang around in the near vicinity as we go into the second half of your Friday. So obviously Friday 3 p.m. this is when many of your weekend plans will be starting. We'll see if we can get the rain out of the picture, but along with that, whatever happens in the way of rain, you do see plenty of cloud cover in the near vicinity, and that's going to be a big reason why your high temperature is only forecasted in the low 80s as opposed to the upper 80s, the low 90s that we do have in store for the next couple of days. Then we transition into the second half of Saturday, and I think there's pretty good agreement that this frontal boundary will pass through central Georgia, but it doesn't quite look like the drier and the cooler air is making its presence known very dominantly. So right now you're still seeing shaded areas of green across the state of Georgia, shaded areas of blue down to the south and the southeast. I think the GFS is really hinting at a stalling of our frontal boundary, which would make sense as we continue to progress into the future, because take a look at what's down to the south and the southeast of us. That's where you're starting to see some yellows, some oranges, and some pinks, which are going to indicate your heavier precipitation, your thunderstorms, and you can see how much this tries to get its act together and maybe show a bit of tropical circulation as we go into the end of the weekend, starting to approach coastal areas of North Carolina, and eventually we'll trek up into coastal areas of Chesapeake Bay, Virginia, Maryland. But right now the scattered rain chances are still in the vicinity of the state of Georgia as we head into the tail end of your weekend. But this is just what one model run is saying. The GFS is really hinting that the rain will stay in the picture. The European model in blue seems to think that this frontal boundary will push clean through, but then it will kind of stall down to the south and the southeast. That's why the European is not initializing a lot of this tropical activity and much circulation with this, because if this frontal boundary continues to push down to the south and the southeast, that will act as a bit of a steering mechanism. So whatever tries to form tropical-wise should get sent back out into the Atlantic Ocean a little bit more. But if the front stalls, doesn't necessarily make that clean passage through central Georgia and the southeast, then obviously this tropical system could move a little bit closer onshore. But this is a big if anything right now. The GFS, out of all the model runs I've looked at, it is the only model run depicting that will have some form of a tropical system try to make a potential landfall on the eastern United States. But of course it does warrant some monitoring as we go across the course of this week into the weekend. And then right now you can see that both models are still hinting at maybe some patchy areas of precipitation and some showers, maybe even a couple thunderstorms as we head into Monday. But we'll continue to keep a very close eye on that. Right now, I still think your rain chances for the weekend are relatively low, just given the amount of uncertainty and disagreement we see amongst these long-range models. But in terms of Thursday and Friday, I did mention it could come at the cost of maybe some stronger weather in the forecast, a couple more thunderstorms than we have been used to. Wouldn't be a bad thing, because this is a look at your drought monitor as of last Tuesday. So you'll see the date right here. I update it every week when we get an update on this drought monitor. As of September 16th, which was last Tuesday. So the drought monitor gets updated every Tuesday, and then they release it out to the public every Thursday. So by the time we get into Thursday, we'll get the latest update with the drought monitor, which will take in all the data that we've received over the course of this past week up until tomorrow later in the day. So obviously we haven't had much rain that has been in the forecast. We've had a couple spotty showers here and there. Overall, whatever you've gotten in the way of rain has probably not done a very good job of alleviating a lot of dry conditions. Maybe a select few areas got lucky, saw about an inch of rain in some areas. That's still not going to be enough to try to get out of these abnormally dry conditions. Overall, you're going to need probably a couple inches of rain in order to get out of the abnormally dry category. But that's what stands for most of central Georgia. Now, obviously, north central Georgia has lucked out a little bit, not in any form of dry conditions. But like I said, this is as of last Tuesday. Given the dry stretch that we've had since that time period, Of course, I do believe that at least some abnormally dry conditions have built in across our northernmost counties, and along with that, you see plenty of moderate drought areas in this tan color over to the west of us, up to the northwest of us, down to the southwest, and continuing to be over to the east, back over into East Georgia and into South Carolina. So we have plenty of moderate drought conditions that are in the near vicinity. I imagine with the latest update that we get this week, we are going to see moderate drought conditions, at the very least, expanded into central Georgia, keeping our fingers crossed that we avoid this category, which would be a severe drought. So what a moderate drought would basically mean is you need to make sure that you carve out a couple of times each and every day, make sure that your lawn's staying hydrated, any type of vegetation that you have, whether that's your backyard garden, whether that's just your flower pots. You need to make sure that those are staying well hydrated because Mother Nature is not giving you a natural source of that rain. Now, as you get into a severe drought, that's where you need to take a couple more serious precautions. But overall, abnormally dry conditions are not really anything to fret about. That just means it's been a while since we've gotten some rain. Once you get into the actual drought categories, that's where you need to start changing how your routine does pertain to any type of vegetation that you don't want seriously drying out, and obviously maybe getting some cracks and stuff and getting that crunchy grass that we don't want to see. But overall, we'll continue to keep you updated on that drought monitor as we go into the near future. And the thing that doesn't look too impressive as of right now, we can take a look at our long-range models about how much rain is this front actually going to dump on us. Well, according to the GFS, this is the model run that had a lot of those rain chances lingering over the course of this weekend. Well, Macon, you only see about 9/10 of an inch of rain. So it does look like most totals are going to be right around an inch, maybe just below an inch. The rain chances are a lot greater farther to the north of us, up into North Georgia, and especially back up into Tennessee and Kentucky, where they're forecasting actually a couple inches of rain. So let's see what the European and the GFS's counterpart has to say about your rain chances. Still somewhere a couple tenths of an inch, maybe even getting into portions that are right there around the inch mark. But overall, it doesn't look like too much in the way of really impressive rain is in store, but we'll take anything that we can get. Even just getting about an inch of rain is going to be a lot better than, say, not getting any rain whatsoever. Now let's check in on the tropics because they have been very active over the last couple of days, specifically Hurricane Gabrielle. So you will notice, number one, the advisory time, 9 a.m. You might say, Alex, that's a weird time for an advisory. You told me that Gabrielle would be getting updates at 5 and 11 each and every morning, each and every afternoon and evening. Well, Hurricane Gabrielle, when you start to reach certain benchmarks, you can get updates that are intermediary of the typical times we receive those updates. So we got a 9 a.m. advisory because Gabrielle not only strengthened into a hurricane, Gabrielle in fact did strengthen into a Category 1 hurricane as of yesterday. Well, Gabrielle jumped from a Category 1 this morning all the way up into a Category 3 storm. So Category 3 is going to be major hurricane status. Gabrielle is not only the second hurricane that we've had in the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season, but it is also the second major hurricane that we've had. Hurricane Aaron was the first. Hurricane Aaron actually popped up to Category 5 status for a brief period when it was out in the Atlantic Ocean, but as it passed the eastern seaboard of the United States, it was more so about a Category 1 storm, maybe even a Category 2. So Gabrielle will mark that second major hurricane, which will be beneficial for seeing how we match up to what we've been forecasting in terms of your major hurricanes this year. It was anywhere from about 3 to 5, and we've already had 2 of them as of now. But Gabrielle has 120 mile per hour winds, and there's still the possibility that Gabrielle even strengthens up into a Category 4 storm because you can see these timestamps right here, still maintaining these very strong winds as we go into Tuesday. So finally Tuesday at 3 p.m. we finally see the downtick to 110 mile per hour winds, and it will steadily continue to weaken into a Category 2, into a Category 1, and it very well may maintain Category 1, or excuse me, tropical storm status as it goes up into the northeast Atlantic Ocean and starts to get really close to areas of Western Europe. But overall, Gabrielle still not going to have any impacts in the United States. So very thankfully, even though this is a major hurricane, not going to pose any impacts besides Bermuda over here to the west of it. Now, some outer bands of rain and some gusty winds are going to be expected in Bermuda over the next 24 hours. Then once we get into the later half of tomorrow, we'll finally see Gabrielle take that curve back out into the Atlantic Ocean. So it's moving north at 10 miles per hour right now. It's going to get more of a northeastern shift, and looks like we just got an update as of the 11 a.m. advisory. No changes in the winds, it does look like, still maintaining that Category 3 status, but the biggest change, like we were just talking about, now the National Hurricane Center is forecasting Gabrielle will intensify into a Category 4 storm before steadily weakening after we get past that timestamp, which I do believe is tomorrow morning. So throughout the rest of today into early tomorrow, Gabrielle will still maintain that major hurricane status. And then I think as we transition into Wednesday, that's when we'll see it go back down into Category 2 status, eventually Category 1, and eventually a tropical storm as it moves towards Western Europe. But Gabrielle is not the only area in the tropics that we are keeping a very close eye on. We have two potential waves of development. Now, as of 8 a.m. this morning, remember 2 and 8 a.m. along with 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. are going to be when we get these updates on the potential areas of development. The first of which is closest to us, is going to be this orange X over here. So it's just to the east of the Windward Islands, the Lesser Antilles, and you can see that the shaded area that it has is moving up to the west and northwest, and this shaded area does get pretty close to the southeast United States. So this is the area that we're probably going to be keeping the closest eye on as of right now. Slim chances of developing over the next 48 hours, so not really anything to worry about in the near future. However, as we go into the later portion of this week, into the weekend, we do have a moderate chance of development, 40% chance of developing past that 48-hour window. Now, if this system gets its act together, this might be what the GFS was picking up on, maybe making a potential landfall up into portions of coastal North Carolina and up in Virginia. But overall, that's the only model run that's been saying this. The good thing is we do have that frontal boundary coming through, and that could act as a steering mechanism to send whatever does form back out into the Atlantic Ocean. And just behind that tropical wave, we do have another that we're monitoring, and you can see all the Saharan dust around it. So obviously, the chances of developing in the next 48 hours are pretty slim at about 20%, but high chances of developing past that 48-hour window at 70%. So that's why it's been given this red shade for high chances of development. This disorganized cluster of showers and thunderstorms looks to follow a similar direction to the west-northwest. And right now, this shaded area goes almost directly along the path of where Gabrielle has gone. Hopefully, we'll just see another storm that will mainly stay out in the Atlantic Ocean. Obviously, we hope it will dodge Bermuda. Don't want any more impacts over there off in that island nation. But right now, the tropics are definitely waking up, and it's a little bit later than usual. But we have two systems with pretty decent chances of development. Gabrielle did mark our 7th named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season. And just for reference, to show you how unactive, I guess, it has been so far in hurricane season, the Pacific is already on the N letter name. They have Tropical Storm Narda out there off the west coast of Mexico. But back here in the Atlantic, this is what we typically worry about. Obviously, we don't see many storms in the Pacific that really impact us unless they cross over Central America and Mexico over into the Gulf and kind of regain some circulation and strengthen. But the next two names to claim are going to be the 8th and 9th name hurricane or named storms for the 2025 hurricane season. The first of which is Humberto, and the next of which is Imelda. So obviously, yes, or Imelda. There's some difficult pronunciations with it, and trust me, I'm studying hard to try to get those pronunciations right, but it does look likely that we could see 2 more named storms by the end of the week this week, and obviously that will put us on a greater pace than what we did see as of last year's hurricane season. We're getting really, really close. In fact, 2 days from now on Wednesday will be the anniversary of when Hurricane Helene did form. So obviously we're running right at a very similar pace as we did the last year's hurricane season. In the beginning of October was quite active. We saw all of these named storms crossed off as we went into the end of hurricane season. I believe we went into the S letter name, maybe even gotten into the T as of last year's hurricane season. So obviously the tropics are going to warrant some monitoring. The good thing is we're not forecasting any impacts in central Georgia for right now. So your 7-day forecast is highlighted by a steady warming trend into Wednesday. Still rain very, very hard to come by. Then the second half of Thursday into early Friday, I think, is going to be our best shot at rain. That frontal boundary driving some widespread showers and storms to the area. Cloud cover and rain keeping the temperature a good amount cooler, somewhere finally below average. and I do have very slim and minuscule rain chances for Saturday and Sunday as of right now. I need a lot more model agreement before I go ahead and maybe up those rain chances, but we'll continue to fine tune that as we get closer. Typically, or it's not atypical to see model disagreement this far out. We will continue to see what's going on with that, but right now I do see a lot more agreement and a lot more of a likely solution that the front will pass through us, and hopefully some slightly cooler and slightly drier air will settle in. If we can get numbers down into the low and mid 80s for just a little bit, that would feel a world's difference as opposed to low 90s that maybe feel like the mid and upper 90s. So that's going to do it for your extended forecast this Monday morning. Be sure to tune back here at 10:30 once again tomorrow for the latest update on the tropics and our end of the week rain chances.